right, this week we're going to spend our time talking about a couple major issues. If you've already explored the content in D2L, you probably have already noticed that this week our homework is a little bit larger. It's a little bit larger in scope, and this is really your first project where you're going to be able to design something and create an original shape. And it's going to be a Ferris wheel. This week's, or my goal for this week is to really give you guys an opportunity to practice your duplication skills. We've been practicing a little bit of duplication here and there. We've been copying and pasting some polygons. But at the most basic level, the results are, well, for a lack of a better word, very basic. Okay? We're going to enhance our duplication method this week and really look at a much more robust platform that allows us to duplicate with some very, very specific results and at a level of detail that we have not yet explored yet. Through this conversation, we're also going to talk a little bit about the role of items. Working on these different items is absolutely the preferred and best way to work. And I want to show you a couple little nuances within the item list that will help you organize your scenes and create a meaningful structure that is very easy to consume by you guys. Okay? We want Modo in every sense to behave the way our brain wants it to behave. The item list is kind of an interesting, finicky little beast, but it takes some big inspiration from other applications, specifically that of Photoshop. So we'll look at the details of the item list today and how it relates to our duplication system here in a minute. Sound good? All right, let's get into it. As you can see over here in Modo, I've created just a simple little ring. There's really not a whole lot of magic associated with this one. And if we explore the contents of our item list, this is what we have. Now, the item list is really a hierarchy. It's a way for us to organize all the different elements that are currently residing inside of this three-dimensional scene. These are the three default items that come with every Luxology scene file. We have a mesh item, a camera, and a light. Items are pretty special. Items, in every sense, are like containers, and each one of these containers plays a very specific role in the 3D art pipeline. Up until now, we've really only have been creating and leveraging and working with the mesh item. What is the responsibility of this container? Yeah, I like it. It holds our polygons. That's really its role. You're only ever going to find vertices, edges, and polygons in a mesh item. It's the only item inside of our ecosystem that allows for that type of component geometry to be placed within. All the other items play very specific roles. Some of them are more obvious than others. Of course, what's the role of the camera item? To take pictures, right? Okay, then we have our lights, which we really haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about yet in this semester. Our lights are going to illuminate our environments and provide the illusion of light sources within inside of our scene. These are not the only items. One of the cool things about the Modo ecosystem is that we have a whole series of items that we can add easily inside of this Add Item pull-down menu in the top right-hand corner of our item list. Of course, we have some backdrop items that we've worked with before. What's the role of a backdrop item? Yeah, reference, right? It's a container solely for reference images. So I like to think of all of these different items as containers who play a very specific part and have a very specific job inside of our 3D art pipeline. And there's a bunch of different items. Some of these that we'll never talk about, constraints, deformers. I mean, look at all the different items that we have available to us here inside of Modo. Okay, there's a bunch of them. We can even ask the computer to create procedurally generated meshes like gears and fractals. It's pretty neat. The item list, however, is always going to remain our home to organizing all of these items. Okay. If you look very carefully, there is a small hierarchy within inside of this item list. At the very top of our item list, we have our project name, and I've done a disservice. My project name is untitled, so let's just save it real fast. That way we can have a little bit more. I know. Ring of Doom. Okay, and now that title name has been placed inside of this topmost element of our scene. Of course, it says .lxl. And if you follow the arrows, and if you follow the little dotted lines, you can start to see the levels of each one of these hierarchies. Of course, we can add new components into the mix and parent other elements to existing elements within inside of our scene and create more programmatic relationships between all these items. I'll save all of that stuff for GCOM 410. But it's a hierarchy. All this information is flowing vertically within inside the list, okay? Think of this, if you will, kind of like your Finder window on your operating system, right? You can sort all of your files and folders in a list, and then you can nest files inside of folders, right? We're doing the exact same thing with the structure of our item list here. Working with the details of our item list is kind of easy. Under each one of these, of course, you can select them, and we'll bring open all down here. Right-clicking on any item will open up this contextual menu, and you can see that there's a number of different things that we can do within this contextual menu that will enhance our item list. Okay? At the top, most importantly, we could very easily rename our items. We can even set the editor color. This is pretty neat. I like showing this right about now in the semester as we're going to start logarithmically increasing the number of items that we're going to be working within our scene. The editor colors is kind of fun. We can begin to color code things like, for example, maybe I do like red. And now you can see that that row in my item list is red. It allows us to draw focus to separate items in an environment where there's a bunch of them. Okay? Something that's critically important when you guys advance into the animation and rigging stage of the 3D art pipeline. Being able to visualize, and color code things quickly is a big time saver, okay? For example, my GCOM 410 class just finished the rigging portion of their class. We spent the last, almost 8 weeks digging into the rigging tools inside of Modo, and at the end of the day, we made a simple, and I mean very basic, simple rig, right? And a rig is really nothing more than a whole series of controls that allow our characters to move, okay? It's like the skeletal system and other elements that go on the inside of our character, right? I think at the end of the day, we had some like 80 some odd items in our item list, okay? So it gets big pretty quickly, and the hierarchies that we create are pretty intense. These editor color things are pretty neat, so keep that in mind. Also, we can also do a number of different things. We're not going to go into all of these, but I do want to draw your attention to this stuff down in here, okay? We have duplicate. Now, when we're working at the item level, we're going to duplicate the entire contents of that container, right? We're not going in, we're not duplicating an individual polygon or an individual vert. We're duplicating everything that's inside that bucket. If we take a look at the item that I'm working with, here's my little ring of doom, and let me just name this real fast. Here's my little ring. Cool. All right. Of course, I could go into a component level and work on verts, edges, and polygons, but I want to work at the item level. And if you notice, when I'm at the item level, here we go, excuse me. There it is. Let me turn my wireframes back on. Turn them off. Yeah. So when you notice that when I'm at the item level, the wireframe color for the entirety of that mesh goes gold, representing that we are now working with everything on this item. Well, I want 2 rings, and I want them to be exact copies of each other. And I want to be able to control them a little bit more intelligently. Of course, there's nothing that says we can't go in and duplicate the polygons, right? But what if I wanted to interactively turn off one ring and turn the other ring on? Or what if I wanted to control that ring separately from the original ring, like shade it differently or animate it? We have to have things separated out on their own items. Duplicating items is really, really easy. If we go over to our item list and right-click on our contextual menu, we can simply duplicate it. Now watch what happens. Okay, we have a pure duplicate now. It's taken all the properties and parameters of the original, and it has, in every sense, just copied it. It's also assigned a number 2 after it to make it a little bit different. And if we move this thing, there we go. Now we have 2. Now let's just take a second and look at what the computer is doing and how it's shading in all of these items. Now, and this is important to note. because in this environment and over in the design lab, students come and go. These are open labs, okay? And they're going to change and monkey with the viewport settings to make it work for them, okay? I have two different items, and you can see quite easily that one is being shaded and the other is just being, kind of a wireframe shaded. Well, what we're seeing here is the active or foreground mesh item and the background mesh item system at play. Modo has this really great system that focuses the tool set on the item that we're currently working on or that is currently selected. If I was to go over to my item list and have it selected, check it out, the background color of that row, and I'm just going to get this back to none here. Those are kind of driving me crazy. There we go. The background color of my of that row has been darkened, which denotes that this is the foreground object. And I select the other one, and we're changing. Yeah, absolutely. Nope, you can just click on it inside the OpenGL viewport. Yeah, very cool, huh? You just click on it, makes it go a whole lot faster. Well, if your computer's doing something a little bit differently, let's change how our active meshes and how most importantly, our inactive meshes are being drawn. The inactive meshes are pretty much the unselected meshes inside of our scene, okay? They've kind of changed their terminology a little bit. If you look at the original documentation and the original structure of Modo, they used to have a foreground object and a background object. The foreground item being the one that's currently selected, and everything else, all the unselected items, would be the background. Now they're kind of going into this active, inactive mesh thing, but it's really just purely what's selected and what's not. If we go into the Inactive Meshes Viewport Property tab, check it out. I can control how my inactive meshes are shaded independently from the one that's currently selected, okay? So specifically, under the shading style, I can say, hey, you're going to be, reflective shading, okay? And now, just visually, this is the active one, this is the inactive one, okay? Let's go back into that property once again. I'll turn my shading style back to wireframe. Makes a little bit more sense. I actually like having it. Huh? O brings up and open your viewport properties. Now, there's one thing that I am hesitant to show you, but it happens. People change this over in the lab, so it's important to notice, okay? At the top of this menu, we have two very, very dangerous channels that I would recommend you never enabling, okay? Or at the very least, only enabling if you feel comfortable with their options, okay? We can make inactive same as active, and that's going to shade all of our items identically. Now, the reason I suggest not doing this because it's very difficult and sometimes unclear as to which mesh in this particular situation is the foreground one, which is the active one. Visibly, they all look the same, right? Which is a little bit of an issue, okay? So I don't like having this on. I like knowing beyond any reasonable doubt which mesh item I'm currently working on and that my tools are influencing. The other one that I would recommend that you don't do, let me just turn that off, is make inactive invisible. Yeah, and that's really it, because there's not a lot of information inside the interface that tells you that this option has been enabled. Visibly looking at the item list here, look at ring and then ring 2. Are the visibility icons for both those items enabled? Yes. We have a disconnect here. We have a broken system, visually from the visual hierarchy and of all this stuff. Our item list is saying that they're both visible, but clearly one is not visible in the scene. This is dangerous. This is the source of a lot of confusion. So please, don't turn this option on, okay?
So turn it on, got it.
Yeah. Only turn it on if you want to be completely frustrated. I mean, if that's your thing, I say do it. So I'm going to leave mine off. I like being able to control how the inactive meshes are being drawn in the scene. I almost always leave it at wireframe. If you want to preview both items in your scene at the exact same time, you can select them just by holding down the Shift key. Doink. Yeah. Yeah, you can do it in the OpenGL viewport. You can also do it over in the item list. Also doing the item list, okay? Great way to interactively see and visualize all the items in your scene. And if you look at what's been selected in the item list, it makes a lot of sense. Hey, Quincy, we're having a hard time hearing over you guys in the back. Sorry. So please make sure you utilize this shift-click thing, okay? It's really, really kind of nice. However, one small thing here. Let's add a third ring into the mix. Let me show you a nuance. I'll duplicate ring 2 one more time. And as I did last time, I'll move it over. Okay. So you're more than welcome to go in and hold down the shift key and grab each one of those items. Awesome. But what if you want to grab and only work with ring number 1 and ring number 2? Okay. Pretty cool. Inside the OpenGL viewport, the shift-click mentality and kind of process will work, as you just saw. However, if you're utilizing exclusively the contents of the item list, that shift-click idea is not going to give you the result that you want, right? If I select ring number 1, hold down the shift key and select ring number 3, what happens?
Ring 2.
Yeah, you've selected everything in between 1 and 3. It's called a gang select, okay? Well, I don't want to do a gang select. I want to do an individual selection, but add new items to that individual selection. Control key, you got it. The control key is your friend when working exclusively in the item list, because then holding down the control key and clicking will add that item to your selection. Really kind of handy, okay? And same goes for deselecting. Hold down the control key, you can click on that item, and it will go away. Whenever we duplicate an item, in every sense, we are completely duplicating the contents of that item. And they are now independent from each other. Even though they all started from the exact same item, the computer and the interface is now treating them as individual separate pieces. So I can go in and I can customize each one of these, and it's not going to have any impact or bearing on the original. Okay? Let me illustrate that. If I went over to ring number 3, I can certainly make them, I can do whatever I want over here in the component mode. I can select a loop, for example, and I don't know, just move it out. See, that one over there does nothing, okay? I go over here and grab these two guys and bevel them out, no impact and bearing on the original mesh item. And if I was to make a change to the original ring number 1, it certainly wouldn't have any influence on what happening on ring 2 and 3. They're separate beasts, okay? Individual, little silos of information that don't talk to each other. One of the great things about working with items is this idea that we can separate things out. We can isolate certain areas of our mesh, put them on their own layer, if you will, or on their own mesh item, and be able to control them independently from the rest of the scene. This is something that you'll see when you get into 401 and 410. If you want something to move independently, like let's say you're making like a tank or something, okay? And you want all the wheels and the treads to move on that tank. Well, each wheel, if it's going to move separately from the other, and each tank tread needs to be its own item, okay? It's the only way we can move things, individually in our animation engine. We don't ever move or we don't ever animate verts, edges, and polygons. Our animation engine is an item-based animation engine. So if I wanted to have, I can't animate a polygon, but I can animate an item. Okay. FYI, and something that I like to do a lot, the keyboard shortcut for activating the item selection set is the number 5 on your top row of keys. I do that a lot. So if you see me magically enable item selection, I just hit the 5 key. Okay. Tell you what, I'm going to delete 2 and 3 here. Oops, excuse me, hit the wrong button. There we go. Now I'm left with just a single item. A minute ago I mentioned that when we duplicate our items, they're completely independent from each other. Note that inside the item list and inside the iconography, if you will, of our interface, a mesh item is represented by that blue cube. You're going to see this a lot. And if you notice, if the This is kind of what the brilliance of the Moto UI. See how the rollover highlight color, is light blue, okay? Same color as the icon, that little three-dimensional cube. That's done specifically to reinforce that you are now about to select a mesh item, okay? The mesh item is pretty special. It's the basic building block of every 3D model that we're going to make, but it's not the only player inside of our system. Let's get ourselves out into the wonderful world of production, okay? A moment ago, I was drawing upon an example of a tank, right? Tank treads. I'm going to need to have each individual tank tread on their own separate item. But what if I've made my model, I'm doing my client review, I'm with my supervisor, he's looking at my object, and he makes a change? What if he or she says, Pat, your tank treads are awesome, but maybe they're too big, or maybe I need to change the size of it, okay? Maybe the profile isn't right, I need you to make a change. Right? This is a moment of panic for me given the existing system, because now I have to go in and individually change each tank track, right? Because they're all separate. I need each tank track to be on its own item, but in certain situations, we want the geometry to be all the same, right? It'd be fantastic if I had one master tank track, right? Tank tread. And then all the others reference the shape of that tank track. It's a pretty cool system. Let me show you how it works. These are called instances. And an instance is a first-class citizen. It is an item like any other item inside of our Moto universe. However, its geometry, its polygonal shape, is referenced to an original. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to make an instance of my little ring here by going into that same right-click contextual menu, and instead of choosing duplicate, I'm going to choose instance. And watch what happens. You'll notice immediately inside of our item list that we'll have a copy of it, but its icon is a little bit different, right? What color is the icon? I was going to say pink, but purple pink, somewhere right around in there. You know, we all see colors a little bit differently, but it is to my eyes, it's a purpley pink. This is an instance, okay? Whenever you see this purpley pink cube, you've created an instance. And let's check out how this instance works in comparison to the traditional mesh item. I can still go in item mode and move this element around. Like that. If I deselect it, you can see that the wireframe colors of an instance matches the icon color inside of our item list. It's that lovely kind of purpley pink. However, and we can do whatever we want to decide. We can move it, we can rotate it, we can scale it. You know, anything that we can do to a normal item, we can do to the instance. Okay, I can rotate it, I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, all right? However, the geometry of our instance is being referenced from the geometry of our master, in this case, the ring. You always know what the master item is because the name of that instance is the same, right? And it's in italics, okay? It says ring, it's in italics, and it's telling us which which item inside of our system is pulling all this geometry from. If I was to go in and change the geometry of my original cube or my original ring, for example, let me just grab that loop. Check it out. Pretty cool, huh? And any change that I make now will be ripple updated to any instance inside of our scene.
So if you scale the original, will the instance also?
If you scale the original in polygon mode, let's find out. The answer to that question is yes. At the polygonal level, any change you make will be adopted by everything that's, by all of the instances of that mesh object. If we're at item level, then no. At item level, I can scale that one independently and then this one independently. Pretty cool, huh? Now, what we have created here is a master in the blue one, and then an instance in the pink one. But the entire contents of that master are going to be instanced, okay? If I was to go in and add new geometry into my original ring item, what would you imagine will happen to the instance? It's going to add to it as well, okay? So we have to be a little bit careful in this, okay? If I went in, for example, and added, I don't know, something else in here. Let's go to my ring. And in polygon mode, I'll just add a cylinder, and you'll see, whoop, there's a new cylinder, right? Whoop, there it is, okay. So the entire contents of the original will be sent to the instanced item, okay? So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Everything on that item is going to be instanced and duplicated and copied. Yeah?
So you don't have any other geometry right now in the background at all, right?
I have my ring and then ring 2, that's it.
You have your ring and your instance ring,
You got it.
and that's it?
That's it.
Okay. So do you have to do this before you add a duplicate ring?
You don't have to, but just be aware. Just be aware that, well, let me take a step back. I want to make sure we're both speaking the same language here. Ask your question again.
Okay. So the purpose of the instance is that if you have multiple rings, then you can make adjustments and they'll be applied all of them.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
So can you do that if you've already created your 2 rings? And can you make an instance, or do you have to make the instance first before you make your duplicate?
It does make sense, and I think I understand what your question is. You can make an instance at any time, and you can even add instances at any time. So if, for example, I could go over to my instance, and I could duplicate this guy. And now I have a third one. Oops, excuse me. More than one selected.
Convert an instance to a duplicate.
There we go. So the question is, can I convert an instance into a traditional mesh item?
Stop and you decide, you know what, I don't want this to be part of that group. I want to take it out of the group because I want to be something special to it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course. I believe it's in the convert. There's a convert in geometry or an item.
It's not just a right click like on
Let's see. I so rarely do it, but I know it's there. It's in here somewhere. Yeah, it's in here somewhere, but you can do it. Yeah, I think it's under change type and mesh. Yeah, there we go. Okay, Nathan, question. You can't. For an instance, you're only working at the item level because the polygons are being generated and driven by the master. Yeah.
So that's where it would make sense if you wanted to do something on the instance level, take it out.
Right. If you needed that specific tank tread to look different from all of its others, then you'd have to convert it to a traditional mesh item.
Work on something where you get a bunch of bolts or something, and then you go,
Right.
I would make this one.
Right, exactly. Fence posts. I do this all the time for fence posts, for architectural stuff, right? I make one fence post, and then I instance duplicate it along the fence line, and then if I need to make a change, I can make a change to the original, and all the instances are updated immediately. It's pretty great. It's pretty good. I did, a couple of years ago, I made a 3D model of this room, and I made one iMac, and I instanced it, 26 times. And I made a couple changes to the original, and all 26 updated at the exact same time. It's pretty great.
You're supposed to make 26 individual.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I cheated.
What
No.
kind of modeler are you?
The tires on my Jeep. Do you think I modeled each one of those tires? Nope. I modeled one, and then I instanced them 4 times, right? Because there was 4 total, and a 5th one in the back. Yeah. It makes life a little bit more fun, does it not? Yeah. It's not about It's not about trying to tackle this brute force, right? Let's go through the modeling phase as intelligently as we can, okay? Okay, so let's talk about why in the world we do this, okay? Why have all these instances? What's the purpose? Well, since the geometry is being referenced, okay? Or let me rephrase that. Since the geometry is being referenced from that master item, we save a little bit at render, right? Because the computer is no longer trying to figure out the shape of each one of these objects and how many polygons are on each. It already knows, right? It looks at the master and that it understands that we have just basically copied and pasted the shape a number of different times, and it's not having to evaluate as much information. So we save a little bit of render, which is great. Okay, makes it a little bit faster to render. Yay! I like that. I did this for roofing tiles a number of years ago, right? I made a ceramic, kind of a, the curved ceramic roofing tiles. Okay, I forget the name of them off the top of my head. Say again? Spanish tiles, yeah. And I had probably 2,000 of these roofing tiles on this building, right? And it was great. They were all instances, and they rendered really fast, really fast.
Can you make like a folder?
You can, yeah. There are folders. There are folders in here, and we'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it seems like a huge pain in the ass. Like the whole thing was just like a billion.
Yeah. Okay. Let's take a look at some of our duplication tools. There we go. And I want to go back to my ring, and I don't want this little cylinder there. Okay. All right. So how do we duplicate things, and how do we duplicate our items intelligently? Because I certainly don't want to have to copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. What if I needed 40 fence posts? You better believe I'm not going to copy and paste 40 of those items. No, I'm not doing that. Okay, that's a waste of my time. And it certainly would be nice if maybe the distance between each one of the fence posts was pretty uniform. I'm not going to go in and hand move all that stuff. That's a waste of my time. I'm not going to do that, right? I'm sitting in front of a fantastic thinking machine. I'd much rather be able to ask the computer to do this for me. Thus enter the duplication tools inside of Modo. If we travel over to the Duplicate tab, you can see all of our duplication tools. We have worked with radial sweep. We also worked with the mirror tool. But now I want to explore some of these others, and specifically, I want to explore all of these guys, okay? Now, notice really carefully that the icons for the curve clone, scatter clone, and all the way down to radial ray is kind of a blue, right? Huh. Why is it blue? Okay, is it green? Are they all green? Okay, great. So that actually is an important focus, okay? They're blue because I'm currently in the item mode, right? And if you remember, the icon color of our mesh item is that light blue, right? Well, we're seeing that reminder inside of our duplication tools. If I change my selection set to polygons, notice that all those icons go green. A nice visual reinforcer as to which level of our hierarchy we are currently duplicating within. I want to duplicate an item. Don't want to duplicate polygons because I want to have maybe 10 of these rings that I can control individually. Okay? Let's go back into item mode real fast and take a look at some of these duplication tools. We're going to start off with the clone tool. The clone tool is going to duplicate items in a straight line. Okay? And it's only, ever going to duplicate objects in a straight line. Okay, let's take a look at what it looks like. I'll fire off the tool, and like other tools inside of our interface, we get tool options down here at the bottom. Number of clones is going to be 10, so that's the number that we're going to start with. Just give me a second here. There we go. These are the settings from yesterday's class. All right. So I haven't done any duplication yet. I don't apply the tool until I click in the viewport, kind of like the bevel tool or the loop slice tool. So once I click, I'm going to get some tool handles. And you can immediately see over in our item list that the computer has made 10 additional copies of this item. Now, these tool handles play an important role. If I start to move these tool handles, you can see that all my items are evenly spaced. Of course, we can also do this vertically along all three of these axes like this.
So that you could use for like stairs or something?
Yeah, exactly. So the clone tool is only ever going to do straight lines. Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, now I'm going to do something that I told you guys not to do. I'm going to do make active same as active inside my viewport properties so it's more easily seen what I'm about to do. Okay, let's do that one more time. Let's clone it out. I want to show you some other parameters here that are kind of fun. Okay, so you get the transform handles here, which will allow us to move our duplicates away from each other. But in addition, we also have some scale and rotation parameters that we can begin to apply to every single one of our duplicates, which is really kind of neat. Check this out. Maybe I want each one of my duplicates to be a little bit smaller than its previous duplicate. So if I hit the little circle, I want it to be like 90%. Now they get smaller. Each duplicate is precisely 90% the size of its previous. We could even, let's just overdrive this. Let's do like 50%. Yeah, and it looks as though, yeah, now look, they're very small. Very small. Very tiny. Very tiny rings, okay?
How do you make it? Is it?
Say again?
Try to formulate the question.
So leave these at 100.
What if you want all of them to be like each one to be 90%, not 90% of the last one and the last one and the last one?
So you want all of them to be exactly 90% the size of the original. I wouldn't do that here. Yeah, I would do it in a separate step. Yeah. You only want to use these options when you want each one to be slightly different from the rest. In addition, check it out. We have also some fun rotation. What if I want each one of these to rotate? Okay, as they're cloned. Let's do a 15-degree rotation along the x-axis. And now they spin. So there's a lot of power in here and how all of these are created and how they're worked.
You were holding out on that.
I was holding out on you guys. You know, I gotta make you guys do it the manual way before I make it easy. Yeah. Yeah. See, now you appreciate this so much more, having duplicated things the hard way, right? It's like when you buy your first nice car after having a really bad, crappy car for a number of years. It's like, I appreciate air conditioning now, you know? Right, exactly. Okay. So one of the things that was asked earlier is there a way for us to group these so we don't have 2,000 rings chilling in our item list? And the answer to that question is yes. Check it out. Under the item effector category of options, we have this parent. It's currently set to off. If we set it to, don't do root, or don't do hierarchy, I'll come back to this. If you do root, watch what happens over in our item list. Okay? And we can expand the disclosure arrow, and there's all of our duplicates parented to the original. It's a great way of grouping things together. Kind of neat. If your parent channel is set to hierarchy, this is kind of lame. I'm not a big fan of this, but some people are. It makes a hierarchy that looks like this, okay, where each ring is parented to the ring before it. Yeah. Kind of an organizational nightmare, but some folks like it. I'll put mine to root. That's, huh? Primary does something very similar. But it puts everything into a group locator, which is a fancy word for folder. Let's put mine to root. There we go. A couple other things. Do bounding boxes. Okay, now don't freak out. Okay, don't freak out. The geometry is still there. What we're seeing is a rough outline, a representation of the volume that this item is populating within. If I was to drop the tool, and go over the render tab, there's all my rings. They're still there. Okay, in very large scenes where you have thousands of items and a lot of complex geometry, asking things to be represented by their bounding box, and OpenGL saves some memory and allows you to continue working. Okay, environments, big thing for environments, right? Because you get out there in the real world, I can guarantee you there will come a time when someone's going to ask you to model a forest. Okay? Yeah, crazy. Yeah, it's pretty great. It's a lot of fun, but we don't want to draw each one of those trees in our OpenGL viewport. You will not get any work done because the computer is going to be working at like 0.5 frames per second. Okay? However, if we turn everything into bounding boxes, we can get a nice representation of all of those elements in the scene, and we can continue working, and then we only take the hit when we hit the render button. All right. Yeah, let's take a break. I think now's a good time to take a break. Take a break. Small little break, okay?